Point, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
And I'd also just want to begin by thanking the Speaker and say that I rise in support of this good piece of legislation, H.R. 2274. It's the Small Business Mergers, Acquisitions, Sales, and Brokerage Simplification Act. It's introduced by the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Huizenga, who will be speaking momentarily. You know, Mr. Speaker, during the period of overly burdensome big government, of Obamacare and of Dodd-Frank, and thousands of more regulations costing Americans literally trillions of dollars, it's really no surprise that the economic growth and job creation in this country remains sluggish. You know, America's small businesses, they're the primary engine of job creation. Well, they're the ones who are disproportionately affected by this simply a deluge of new rules and regulation coming out of Washington daily. In fact, according to a recent survey, small businessmen continue to identify government regulation and red tape as the single most important problem facing them. And so while our colleagues in the Senate appear unwilling these days to pass any legislation to help create jobs, well, we have H.R. 2074 in the House that we take up, and it is done in a bipartisan manner. It's a common-sense piece of legislation that will remove some of these unnecessary regulations and obstacles to small business development and growth and job creation. What it will do, let me explain this, would exempt brokers who perform services in connection with the transfer of ownership of small, privately held companies. They're also known as M&A brokers from the SEC's costly one-size-fits-all registration requirements that we have right now. So while terms like that we sometimes hear in the press and elsewhere, mergers, acquisitions, brokers, you know, they may give you the image of big Wall Streets and what have you, but make no mistake about it. This bill is about helping Main Street. You see, M&A brokers play a very, very important role helping small businesses and small business owners successfully navigate their way through and transfer their company or sell their company to new owners, new enterprises, instead of simply closing up their shop and going out of business. Yet under the current SEC one-size-fits-all registration regime, M&A brokers face a myriad of costly regulations. And unfortunately, M&A brokers have to pass these costs on to, well, other small businesses and, of course, eventually the public. So it's no wonder this legislation has now received widespread and bipartisan support. In fact, this bill was unanimously approved by the committee 57-0. Let me get this straight, 57-0. So I'd like to thank the sponsor, Mr. Huizenga, for all his hard work on this legislation and bringing it to the board. At a time like this, when America's small businesses are struggling through a mire of regulation and red tape, this type of bipartisan, pro-small business, pro-job legislation is exactly the type of thing we need, and I urge my colleagues on both sides to pass it, as we did in the committee, in a bipartisan